And once Mr. Lloyd is done, that's it.
Well, I gotta first say, TT, I really appreciate the invite. I appreciate you just hosting this event. This is wonderful to bring this to Orangeburg, South Carolina, to bring it to South Carolina, and to share your vision with us. So I appreciate you for doing that. My name is Lloyd Hale. I am from a small town called Georgetown, South Carolina. Now, I know, that's right. That is DJ in the land right here, Georgetown. But, Georgetown, South Carolina. That's, I'm from town. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share a little of my personal story, but I'm also going to give you some components of how I made it from A to Z, so to speak, all right? So, as I said, I'm from town. And when I was about 16 years old, I got myself into some trouble. And at 17, I was diagnosed with an illness called schizophrenia. If anyone's familiar with mental illness, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia at 17 years old. Now, schizophrenia is several different symptoms that go along with that diagnosis. And it's like you might hear voices that other people don't hear. You might believe things that are kind of way different from what everyone else believes. Sometimes paranoia takes place and all that good stuff. So I found myself from institution to institution. I'm talking about from DJJ to the county jail, from the county jail to the state hospital. From the state hospital, I found myself in a boarding home. So this is like 6 years worth of just in and out of institution to institution. But along that period of time, I was learning a lot, right? So I started meeting lots of people and finding out what I could do to make myself well. Because when you start going through those systems, people start kind of giving you the recipe for wellness. But the recipe for wellness as they see it, not as what you want for yourself or as you see it. They start giving you the recipe for what they see is good for you, right? So you got to kind of pick apart some of that stuff and find out what's good for you and pound it in and find out what's not so good for you and take it off. So after I was released from all of that stuff, I got me a little job and all that kind of stuff. And people started saying, Lloyd, you should advocate for people living with mental health conditions. You should advocate for people because you're doing so well. Now, keep in mind, one of the very first experiences that I had when I started really learning about what I was going through, one of the best experiences that I had, I was in shackles and handcuffs. I was actually in the hospital at the time, on a locked unit in the hospital. And there was this program that allowed us to go out into the community and learn with people who were also out in the community. So in shackles and handcuffs, I sat at this table with a company called South Carolina Share. I sat at this table and I learned among other people who were living in the community. So I had my shackles on and I was sitting there learning, just trying to get the most out of this program. Fast forward, I started working for the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. I did that for about 14 and a half years, helping people understand that recovery is possible and that no matter how far down you've come from, you can always get back up. So I did that for about 14 and a half years, working with churches and families and schools, just making sure that people know that recovery is possible. I left there in 2018 because, I like to make sure that I'm valued where I am. And I'm not trying to say that the Department of Mental Health didn't value me, but the dollars didn't match what they say they value, right? The dollars just didn't match it, right? And I thought I needed more money. I wanted more money, so I wanted to go for it. So I started working with a company called Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And they were developing a counseling program that I was a part of already. So I helped them develop that counseling program, and I left there, and I moved over to South Carolina Share last year to start working as the assistant director of South Carolina Share last year, just helping them train and help people living with mental health conditions. Yesterday, I became the executive director of South Carolina Share. So, just to give you a small piece now. So just to keep in mind, this is the same company that I sat in shackles and handcuffs. I sat in there in shackles and handcuffs to learn about recovery and to do better for myself, right? Now this company trusts me to lead the way as the executive director. So what I'm going to do today is oftentimes people say, well, Lloyd, how did you do it? How did you make it from where you were to where you are now? People ask me that question a lot. Now, oftentimes, I used to always say, nothing but God. Nothing but God. Or I would say the medications helped me because it was a point in time in my life when I was on medication. The medications did. Or I had some of the best counselors in the world. I would always give all of my credit away. I would never take credit for the work that I put into my recovery. I would never take credit for the work that I put into my life. So I started realizing all of the small steps that I had to put into place in order to sustain my wellness, if that makes sense, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the small recipe that I have, and it's called STAND. That's S-T-A-N-D. If you want to write it down, you sure can, all right? So I talk in stories, so I like to share stories, all right? So I'm going to share a few stories with you, and hopefully we can wrap it all up on a good note. I appreciate TT letting me be the last speaker today. Actually, I feel honored.
All right.
I feel honored.
You are your shit.
So I had a 1997 Chevy Astro van. Now this was a bad mamma jamma. I'm talking about. Now don't get me wrong. It didn't look so tough. It looked rough. The back bumper was hanging off. I had the bumper tied on with a bungee cord. The back bumper. The side door, when you would slide it off, it would end up in your hand. Right, so it was a rough looking car, but the engine was strong. I'm talking about, I took about, in the course of about 4 years, I took about 15 trips back and forth to New York City to visit my father and my brother and them. About 15 trips. I would go, and this is how I used to work. I used to go I was living in Charleston at the time. I would leave Charleston, I would go down to Beaufort and grab my little brother, leave Beaufort and go down to town and grab my niece and nephew, leave town and go down to Winston-Salem and grab my son, and then we would all go to New York. In this 1997 Chevy Astro van, this one day though, I'm actually on my way back home from Columbia, South Carolina, this one particular day, and I got a flat tire. And it's late night, because I usually I move, and time doesn't hold me still. I don't care what time of night it is. If I gotta go, I gotta go. That's just how I operate, right? So in the middle of the night, I get a flat tire, I pull the car over, and I'm out there trying to change this tire, but for some reason, these lugs were just stuck on there. It was stuck on there, right? So couldn't get the lug nut off, so I get frustrated, just mad, I slung my keys, and I lost my keys out there in the dark as well. So I said, okay, I'm gonna leave this alone for the night. I called my cousin. My cousin came and picked me up from Columbia because I had just finished visiting my cousin. And I went down there, got some sleep for the night. I got a call first thing the next morning. Hey, Lord, it was a guy named Levester Brown. He actually was a pastor here in Orangeburg for many years. He passed away recently, so God bless. But I got a call from him. He said, Lloyd, how you doing? I said, I'm all right. He said, are you driving? Is your car on the side of the road on I-26? And now keep in mind, I was frustrated because all of the tire spots were closed when I got stuck. All of the tire spots were closed. And I was in Columbia, where I'm not even from, so I don't know what to do at this point. I got to figure out in the morning. It was like a Sunday morning. He calls me. He said, you know what I do for a living, right? I said, what do you do? He said, I actually travel the interstate and I change tires on tractor trailers. So I said, oh, man. I said, I'll meet you at the car. By the time I got to my car, he was under the car, jacking it up, making sure that my spare tire was changed. I found my keys and I was on the road. Now, the key to that is making sure that you have the right support people in your circle. So that's what the S stands for in STAND. Making sure that your supporters got your back no matter what. Make sure they can see, Lloyd is having a hard time. TT is having a hard time. I'm going to help TT out. Make sure your supporters got your back 100%. So you don't have time for the nonsense of people being in your circle backbiting and trying to take what you got and trying to stop you from where you're going. Make sure they got your back, all right? So the T is for therapy. That's what the T is for. Now, when I was coming through my treatment and all that kind of stuff, we were always told, just go in there and do what the doctors say do. Yeah. Don't give the doctor no lip. Just do what the doctors say do. Just if they say do it, you just do it. And what I found, they had me on a medicine at one point. I won't say the name of the medicine, but it caused me to drool.
Oh my!
I'm talking about drool. I mean saliva coming out my mouth, right? So any given time, I'd be sitting in a chair and I would have this puddle of drool sitting on my shirt. It was disgusting. And people would say, just do what the doctors say do. And I said, well, wait a minute now. I want better for myself. When I get out of this hospital, I want a job. I want a relationship. I want to look good. I feel like I want to get fly sometimes. How am I look fly and I got a puddle of drool on my shirt at all times? Now, let's bring this thing home because all of us had this experience, right? You ever been sitting down, maybe watch some Netflix? TT, now I know you're going to keep it real with me. You watching some Netflix, you really relax, and a little bit of drool just kind of drip out your mouth right there. That ever happen to you? That happens to me. Anyone else that ever happened to? All right. That happens to me every now and again. But it's embarrassing when it's uncontrollable. And people were telling me, you just do what the doctors say do. You just do. So I said to myself, I ain't living like that. So when I would see the doctor, I would say, hey, doc, we got to change this. I'm willing to do what I'm supposed to do, but I cannot continue to live like this. Not only am I drooling on myself, but I'm also coughing on it at night when I go to sleep. So we got to change this. So we started looking at therapy as a way of taking care of yourself, regardless of what everybody else got to say. You take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself can mean many things. I know we talked about the music coming up here. Taking care of yourself can mean doing the things that make you feel good. When TT sent me the music, she asked me about the music. It was a song called The Blast by Talib Kweli and High Tech. It was a wonderful song, and when that song comes on, I mean, I cut up when that, just the beat alone, I just cut up because it makes me feel real good. So I would ask myself, if I were you, and I ask myself every day, what am I doing to make me feel good? Because we spend lots of time trying to satisfy the boss, satisfy the kids, satisfy the spouse. What are we doing to satisfy ourselves? And that is therapy, not just the traditional sense of going and sitting in the doctor's office. Not traditional sense, some people call it like, some people do shopping therapy even. Yes. Do what makes you feel good sometimes, and it's okay to do so, all right? This is one of my favorites right here. The third piece of this is the A, and that means agreement. Agreement. What kind of agreements have you made about life? What kind of agreements have you made? Now, my father, I love my father. My father, he gave me that 1997 Chevy Astro van. My father did lots of time in my life. I mean, about 14 years he did time in prison in my life. By the age of about 17, he had already did about 14 of those years in prison. And when he came home, he was what most people would call unemployable because he had so many felonies on his record. So he was so determined that he wasn't going back to that old lifestyle. He didn't want to go back to selling the drugs that he used to sell because there was one end to that. So he said, I got to figure something out. So what he started doing is he started collecting cans. This is a real story. He started collecting cans and sweeping up around stores, making a little $5 here. And at a nickel a can, and that little $5 and $10 here, this fella saved up enough money to buy a van. Enough money to buy a van. And after he did that, he did some more, and he saved up enough money to buy socks and incense and oils and lotions. And he would take that van to the streets of New York, and he would set up these tables with socks and incense and lotions and oils. And he moved from there into a store on the corner of Ralph and Herkimer Street in Brooklyn, New York. So this fella told me that it doesn't matter what you came from. If you agree that it's going to stop you, it's going to stop you. When I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, they said, you ain't going to do blank because of your diagnosis. You'll never be able to go back to school because of your diagnosis. You won't be able to manage money on your own because of your diagnosis. And I'm like, my name is Lloyd J. Hale II. I'm going to do what I want to do. You're not going to determine for me what my life is going to look like. No one is. And I challenge you to live the same way. Don't let anyone determine how the rest of your life is going to look. I am a fella, and I'm proud to say I have a GED. A GED. With my GED, I am standing in the recovery world. I'm standing in one of the highest positions in the state of South Carolina with the GED. So you can't tell me where I'm going to go based on what you believe about life, all right? And that's the attitude that I take everywhere that I go. Now, I'm going to share a couple more stories and I'm going to get up out of here. All right? The N, so we got S, support, T, therapy, A, agreement. The N is for nutrition. Nutrition. Now, I like the N too because anyone ever taste Sweet 16 donuts? Yeah, I love me some Sweet 16 donuts. I can eat a bag of Sweet 16 donuts. Now, one of these times, I haven't taken medication in about 8 years now. However, when I was on medication, one of the side effects is it makes you hungry, really hungry. So I would get sleepy and I would stay up all night eating. There's one particular night, I'm standing in front of my stove, and I'm standing like this, because this is how I'm standing in front of the stove. I'm so sleepy, this is keeping me from falling. So this is how I'm standing. And I'm picking these Sweet 16 donuts off one by one, picking them off. Before you know it, I ate the whole bag, and I went to sleep. Went to sleep with donuts all over my mouth and everything. Went to sleep, right? The next morning, though, I get up for work, and I get to work, and around 1 or 2 o'clock, I'm feeling like, what's going on with me? I don't feel so good. And this is what happens. I started questioning myself. Am I taking care of my wellness? Is my schizophrenia starting to slip back into play? Am I depressed? And I started thinking no, you just ate a whole bag of Sweet 16 donuts. That's what your problem is. You ain't feeling good because you're not taking care of yourself. Your nutrition is a little off. And sometimes when our nutrition is off, it can cause some symptoms. And those symptoms can be many different things. Now let's take it a little further. Let's dig a little bit deeper with the nutrition idea. So when we look at nutrition, let's look at the inner workings of things. The nutrition of things is the inner working of things, right? So let's say in our relationships, the nutrition can be, and honesty can be nutrition for relationships, or agreements can even be nutrition, or communication can be nutrition for relationships, all right? So if that nutrition in a relationship is off, it's going to start putting off symptoms of impatience, symptoms of disorder, symptoms of dysfunction. So it's important to pay attention to that nutrition in many areas of our lives, not just the traditional sense of food, but there's nutrition in many areas, even in our work lives, all right? So we got support, therapy, agreement, nutrition, and the D, I love D, is because D stands for distance.
Oh my God.
Distance. As you start to develop healthier areas in your life, it's important to create space between the way you used to do things. It's so important to create some space in how you used to do things. Now, you know, my mouth can be terrible. I can be terrible with my profanity sometimes.
Me too.
Okay, well, I'm among friends. However, there was a time when I was not quite fond of the way I spoke. I didn't like all of it because it was every other word. I was just cussing. So I wanted to challenge myself to develop a vocabulary. So I said to myself, every time I cuss, I'm going to get down and do 10 push-ups. That's what I told myself. Every time. TT said, I ain't doing that. I said, every time I cuss, I'm going to get down and do 10 push-ups. Every time I cuss. So every now and then, I'll be talking to somebody, and maybe in the supermarket or something, I get down and do 10 push-ups. And it became so strange to be like, what you doing, Lloyd? What you doing? But I'm taking care of myself right now. Don't mind me, don't pay me no mind. But what happened over time, I would say about 2 or 3 weeks of doing so, what happened is I started noticing that I was going to cuss before I even cussed. I started noticing the behavior before it even came out. And when we create space, because situations are going to come up. You know, it's going to be bills that are overdue. It's going to be friends that don't mean you no good that come back into your life. It's going to be some agreements that are off. Your nutrition, you're going to slip sometimes and want to have some fun. So things are going to happen in life. So make sure you're creating that space so that it's not so easy to dive right back into your old way of doing things. So you got to create some distance in there. And sometimes that distance comes in the forms of behavior modification tools, so to speak. Like for me, it was doing the push-ups so that I could identify with the behavior, all right? So that's what I challenge you all to do, is to really consider that stand technique. I use it all the time. Support, therapy, agreement, nutrition, and distance. I use it all the time. And soon to come, you'll see that in stores. It's going to be in stores. It's going to be a workbook that you can also work through. So be on the lookout for that. Check out www.open80.com. Stop by the table, grab yourself a book. I love you all. I appreciate y'all.